Hey everybody, this is Casey Robinson here, and our group is going over Boundaryless Organization. So I want to get you guys started, and with a little introduction to our group. It consists of myself, also Grant Sheridan, Stephen Ellison, Alex Casel, and Donovan Gregory, and I apologize if I really messed up any of your guys' names because you just have to bear with me, it is an online class. So if we jump into the first slide, I'll talk to you guys a little bit about what a boundaryless organization is. So a boundaryless organization, it's almost explained in the name of, if you take like a traditional, typical organization or business, it usually has all of these boundaries of tons of different little departments that work mostly isolated, and then management that goes all the way from the CEO, and then there's 15 levels down to the grunt worker. What a boundaryless organization does is it tries to eliminate as much as that as it can. Internal levels between, and even barriers between like the client and the business itself. And the interdepartment projects are really central to this too, so you're not just working in your little cubicle, in your little department, in some office building somewhere. You can be working with literally any other department in the organization because those boundaries have been taken away. This is something that was recognized by the former General Electric CEO Jack Welch when he noticed that there is just way too much overhead. If there is an idea by the grunt worker, it has to filter its way. If it's good enough, it might survive filtering its way all the way up to the top, and then maybe filter its way down to the bottom, which can take months or years, and by the time it's implemented, might not even be the same idea. And so he said, it's too much, this is useless. Let's implement a horizontal management structure and break down some of these barriers that aren't serving us any good. And so that includes, like I said, barriers from interdepartments, barriers, even geographical barriers. You can have thousands of work sites around the world and have everyone connected via, this is the 21st century with any number of technologies.
Two examples of boundaryless organizations include General Electric and Pixar. The CEO of General Electric, Jack Welch, wanted his corporation to be a corporation without boundaries. In a Harvard Business Review, Jack Welch was quoted saying, "Our dream for the 1990s is a boundaryless company where we knock down the walls that separate us from each other on the inside and from our key constituencies on the outside." He wanted to completely revolutionize his multi-billion-dollar company with this new type of organization, an organization where they would ignore or erase the labels such as management, salaried, hourly, which get in the way of people working together. Now, Pixar is all about fostering creativity in their company, and a boundaryless organization helps them to foster that creative environment. Associates from Pixar work with each other across departments and teams, and they even will work with communities, bringing their ideas and coming up with new ideas in those communities. Both companies may not have a 100% boundaryless organization, but they each strive to follow the basic principles of one.
Hi, my name is Steve Ellison, and I'm going to be going over the boundaryless organization advantages. So the main advantages of the boundaryless organization are essentially, as the name implies, being able to overcome the boundaries that other organizational structures have problems with. So the first boundaries that this structure overcomes are called vertical boundaries. So in other words, these are boundaries between different levels of an organization, so the hierarchy. So basically the boundaryless organizational structure overcomes this by simplifying the hierarchy, minimizing the importance of rank and things like that. The second boundary that this organizational structure overcomes is called horizontal boundaries, or in other words, the boundaries are between different departments within an organization. So basically, like a boundaryless organization could have like cross-functional teams, so people from different departments like have representation within different teams, so everyone is kind of a generalist. The next thing that this overcomes is the external boundaries. So in other words, boundaries between the organization and the outside world. So the outside world being like customers and suppliers and things like that. And this can be overcome through things like customer feedback or feedback from suppliers. And the last thing the last advantage of the boundaryless organization is overcoming geographic boundaries. So in other words, like the literal physical barriers between different people or teams within an organization. And like this was mentioned earlier in the presentation, this can basically be done through different technological means, so like conference calls, emails, and stuff like that.
Okay, I'm Alex Casal, and I'll be discussing the disadvantages that exist within various boundaryless organization structures. First, I'll focus on the modular structure, where the business is divided into small business units that focus on specific elements of the entire organization's process. One issue is that there is a possible loss of communication quality between departments. This is because there is still some form of boundary that exists. While the modules can be boundaryless inside, it's not as easy to communicate with outside modules when necessary. Another is when upper management needs to find a fine balance between the modularity between the structures, as the cons of one setup could outweigh the pros in another setup. And I've included a picture here of a sample modular design within boundaryless organizations with a hospital where you have the hospital unit, family, genetics, the laboratory, radiology, and so on. Next is the virtual structure, where there is a cooperation among various companies. Here, a lack of trust between organizations could build. Perhaps an organization is missing deadlines or doesn't always provide accurate information. A lack of organization identification with employees could also build, as collaboration is across multiple businesses. And strong communication is a must, because we're talking about discussing issues between different companies through email, through phone, and other methods. Lastly is the hollow organization, where work is divided between core and non-core competencies of employees. Cons of this are the loss of control over functions that affect the employees regularly, the restrictions by certain industries such as healthcare on the extent of outsourcing, where there are non-core competencies. They need to go out and find another organization or group that can do that work, and lack of competitive outsourcing options.
Hey everyone, my name is Donovan Gregory, and I'm going to talk to you about the effectiveness of boundaryless organization. So, the effectiveness of boundaryless organization really depends on the intent of the organization in implementing this technique. It's considered to work really well if the intent of the organization was to go ahead and save money by cutting costs, keeping the team small, and it's also been found to raise stock prices pretty well. However, in larger companies, they have found some issues with boundaryless organization. A lot of chaos that gets created. However, in small companies, it actually has a very good rate of success. And ultimately, the effectiveness of boundaryless organization is reliant upon the leadership within the organization. It requires true leadership, people who others want to follow. If it's someone that they don't really care about or don't respect, then ultimately this is going to fail, because no one's going to listen, which in this kind of organization leads to greater chaos.